Thank you for joining this episode of our webinar series on best practices in digital risk management and cybersecurity. Today's session is focused on best practices protecting your brand from escalating digital threats. During today's event, you'll hear from two stewards of premier global luxury brands in addition to Digital Shadows. Our webinars take place monthly and cover the latest threats, trends, and best practices in digital risk management and cybersecurity. You'll find a listing of live and on-demand events on digitalshadows.com. Before we get started, we've got a few housekeeping rules. First, your phones will be muted for the duration of the webcast to prevent background noise from interfering with today's presentations. To submit a question for our presenters, please type it into the Q&A panel found on the Event Center console. Lastly, if you have any issues with audio or video, please message the host privately or email us at messages@digitalshadows.com and we'll address it right away. Joining us today is a panel of three experts. First is Charles Olshansky, Senior Director of Investigation Services for Tiffany & Co. Charles is responsible for developing, implementing, and monitoring the company's global trademark enforcement strategies and initiatives focused on the protection of the brand's integrity. This includes managing the company's global investigation strategy and execution in all business channels, including a proactive intelligence gathering component to identify advanced and latent risks to the business and its assets. Joining Charles is Sasha Mayer, Head of IT and Cyber Resilience at IWC Schaffhausen. Sasha has over 15 years experience in strategic, tactical, operational IT, and information security. His in-depth understanding of implementing and maintaining information security strategies and systems is instrumental in protecting the IWC brands. Having received multiple awards, he is a pioneer in cyber intelligence, threat intelligence, and security awareness. Joining Sasha and Charles is Michael Marriott, Senior Product Marketing Manager for Digital Shadows. Michael joined Digital Shadows as a senior strategy and research analyst in late 2014. Michael has a passion for security analysis and the trends they indicate to better protect clients. He has written several articles and papers, and his research is regularly featured in the press. He holds a BA in History and a Master's in Applied Security and Strategy, both from the University of Exeter. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Charles Olshansky. Charles?
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me today. I'm going to share with you today a brief overview of our company, my department's focus, followed by a general outline of our strategy in 2018. Next, I intend to speak about data automation process that we use for conducting online investigations and provide you with some examples for these investigations. I will then close my portion of this webinar by explaining how we utilize and manage data from our investigations and how it helps us to empower our employees and raise the level of engagement for protecting our brand. So just the first word about Tiffany and who we are, because most people do know us, but not everyone. So I want to give you a brief intro into our company. First, as it indicates, we were founded in 1837 in New York City. We have 300 plus stores globally, a little over $4 billion in revenue, in annual revenue, and an employee count of just over 12,000 globally. A couple of interesting things about our company that people may or may not know. In terms of our brand recognition, we are often recognized with the Tiffany blue box, as you see in the image. People will often say if they receive something in a Tiffany blue box, there's going to be something special inside, which we love to hear. We're also known for the middle image, which is our heart tag bracelet, or Return to Tiffany heart tag bracelet. It's very popular. By quantity, it's the most popular item that we sell throughout the world. The final image just represents our Tiffany engagement piece, which is also known as the Tiffany setting, or what we're launching as Tiffany Pure moving forward to indicate the pure sourcing of our stone. But the six-prong setting, as it was originally designed, is intended to allow for light to permeate the stone from several different angles, providing the Tiffany diamond all of its due luster and color that's necessary to showcase the brilliance of the stone. Some things that people don't recognize us for immediately are the celebrations that we offer for specific milestones and celebrating worldwide events. And we make the Lombardi Trophy, which is known for the National Football League. the Larry O'Brien Trophy for the National Basketball Association, and then finally here in the United States, the World Series Trophy for Major League Baseball. We also make other major trophies in sports like tennis and golf throughout the world. It's something not readily known for, but we love to celebrate milestones and recognitions in people's lives. One really fun fact about our company is just to provide a little historical perspective on the legacy and how old we are. As I mentioned, we were founded in 1837. This image represents a Union sword that was manufactured by our company for the Civil War. It really lends perspective on how old we are. And if you look closely at the image, you can see our name, Tiffany, in the middle. So on to what my department focuses on. So we have three main components. There's corporate investigations, the trademark, and risk mitigation. So corporate investigations deals with just classic investigations of theft, both internal and external, certain policy violations, and a code of conduct and ethics. We stand up our investigations committee here, which brings together different departments throughout the organization, like legal, human resources, and IT security, as well as internal audit, to discuss all of our investigations on a quarterly basis. In the trademark bucket, we focus on counterfeiting as well as infringements. We look at a lot of things over the internet. Most of it is migrated to that space, and the biggest challenge there is social media and the marketing of different counterfeit on platforms like auction sites. The final bucket we focus on is risk mitigation, where we deal with external threats, executive protection, and certain insider threats, as well as due diligence. In today's breakout, I'll focus mainly on those last two components with the specifics in the trademark. For our strategy in 2018, we focused on four components: data automation, reporting mechanisms, social media, and restitution, which is concurrent, that we look at every year to try and bring back assets that are spent through conducting investigations. I'll spend a lot of time today on looking at the different ways we extract data and social media in my segment. Some of the objectives that we put forward for the C-suite, the C-suite put forward to Wall Street as public offerings for enhancing our brand and promoting our brand for the next 2 to 3 years. We had 6 pillars. Our group really focused on 3 of these as really important to the work that we put forward for the organization. First, delivering an exciting omni-channel experience for the customer. We know that protecting the counterfeit space in the omni-channel is extremely important, especially as the organization stands up and promotes the omni-channel space. You must have a clean space on the counterfeiting side as well. So we spent a lot of time and a lot of effort on investigating this space. We also spent time on the last 2, cultivating a more efficient operating model and inspiring an aligned and agile organization to win. The systems that we use, as you'll see in a moment, allow us to be efficient and allow us to be nimble and change our strategies as necessary based on the activity around investigation. So talking specifically now about how we automate and learn from data, we do a lot in this space as it relates to collecting data. And the nice thing here is most of the data that's collected is done for us. So we have a system that crawls the web using a variety of different sources. So we use both search terms that we develop, so counterfeit search terms, for example, or genuine search terms, so just the Tiffany logo and Tiffany trademarks, but as well as image searching, which is very important. So we put forward all of the images that we want the system to crawl the internet for us to look for, and then it extracts and puts out different results that are filtered and assessed for us. And in terms of that, we get the information filtered down. I'm not going to get too specific here because I know some of my partners in the webinar are going to do that. But in 2018, we looked at sort of the following key incidents that were brought out of data automation. So there were 23 negative comments pointed internally that we took investigations on. We saw 27 potential targeted protests around our businesses. We saw 9 information security issues, and this is not something that the tool points at for us because we have a separate information security group that also looks for network intrusion. We found other things on the dark web, like possibly stolen credentials for one, malicious scanning for some of our virtual private networks. And we shared that with our information team, so that number is a little bit lower, but we do pass that along, and that's something that they're not necessarily getting with their own tools. The bulk of it, as you can see, was on domain abuse and social media, which is exactly where we spent most of our strategy, as you saw earlier. We had 4,500 incidents of domain abuse, so most of those are counterfeit websites, and you'll see that in a moment. and then 12,000 issues of social media counterfeiting that we disrupted last year. And then finally, the last bucket just represents potential distribution, which turned out to be just sellers on Amazon. So it really wasn't a gray market situation. It was just sellers on Amazon. It was false positive there. So I'm going to provide some specific examples on what the tool grabbed for us in 2018. So here's a screenshot of one of the items that we pulled from Instagram. And this is what typical social media looks like in the counterfeit space for Tiffany. So in this case, the hashtag is fake Tiffany jewelry. So it's pretty obvious that they're marketing what appears to be counterfeit products. And then you see that followed by a variety of images. So this is typical of what we see. And important, as I mentioned earlier about protecting the omni-channel space, it's important to remove these items and keep that space clean. So things like this example are important to have our team take action on and remove. Some infringement examples, so the system will pull some listings that may or may not be issues to our organization. As you can see in these examples, these are some more recent ones. It's just using the name Tiffany in it. So some of these we may object to and some of them we may not. Most of them we don't because, for example, as you can see in this slide, the top listing, TiffanyNailAndSpa.com, is not necessarily taking advantage or infringing on our brand. They're not using Tiffany color, they just have the name, which is okay. Had it been the opposite, and we've seen that where they tend to associate to our brand with the coloring, say the Tiffany blue or some kind of jewelry monograms in their advertising, we would object to that and consider it an infringement. So the system automatically will pull all of these potential infringements for us. Here's something that when we take advantage, when we object to the infringement, here's a good example of what it will pull for us. And the system pulls two things. It will pull the screenshot, which you see here, but it also pulls the URL, so if you want to drive into it. And if you do decide to drive into the URL, you do get a warning that you could be harmful to your computer in case you didn't mean to. You need to know that. It's very important. Obviously, some of the sites can be malicious. So in this case, we're looking at someone that's trying to sell this domain, take advantage of our brand. So they're trying to get our attention to see if we want to buy it or sell it to anyone that may want to resell to us. And in this case, this is something we probably would take action on. We have a Tiffany True campaign that's ongoing, which I mentioned earlier for our setting. So this is something we would consider an infringement. Some examples of counterfeit websites. So these are very typical to what we see in the system pulls for us and some of the domains that I shared earlier. So these again just are indicating something in front of the legitimate URL that we use at Tiffany.com. They just add a few words. And these are a little bit dated, but this is typically what you see in the sense that all of our images are stolen and they're used in these campaigns to try to legitimize their sites. So the pictures and the products are something we used in our own legitimate marketing and advertising. So the counterfeiters use that to the advantage of trying to fool the consumer to think that these are genuine sites or offshoots, maybe discounting that we use for some of our sites. In this particular example, we're talking about a spamming campaign that my team dealt with last year. We got a lot of attention. And in it, the counterfeiters would do their own web crawling and find followers of the Tiffany brand. And then they would send out spamming campaigns to their social media accounts. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, those are really the main social media feeds that we use. Any followers in those feeds receive these emails and they might think it's coming from us and it's because they're followers of our brand. There's a one-time sale. So when you click on these links, it drives you down 4 or 5 different links into the deep web, unbeknowingly mostly to the followers that they're now on the deep web, where counterfeit products are trafficked. And these sites aren't kept up for very long, usually maybe a week or two at a time. So it was a big problem for us. As you can imagine, a lot of our customers complained and our board of directors really wanted some action taken here. So we had a challenge, but we were able to, the system, the automated system, we adjusted it to look for these specific images as well as the language in these campaigns. And we found a domain that was pointed at over 4,000 different deep web sites that were both active and dormant that we were able to take immediate action on and remove that completely disabled this campaign. So the system was very effective in eliminating this particular problem that was a huge one for us. When we remove domains, we typically will put on, if they're on the surface web on Google or Bing, we will typically put a judgment page, especially if it has strong search engine optimization or SEO. This allows the the shoppers on these sites to know that we take our brand protection seriously, and that if you seek to come back to this site, that that they were engaged in illegal activity. So this is actual judgment. This one's a little bit dated from 2015, but you get the idea of what we might do on the surface web. But quite honestly, most of these sites that we're seeing are now below the surface web into that deep web, which I mentioned previously. Just moving along, what the system can also do for us, as I mentioned in the setup of the different incidents that it pulls, we look at physical threats. So in this case, someone was using Twitter to promote protesting around the sourcing of our diamonds, which was untrue, but saying that it's associated with the war effort in Israel. So something like this is grabbed for us immediately. It's flagged to us within seconds, and then we can assemble our team and take action to A, remove it if possible, and then B, take action locally at one of our stores physically to prepare for any protesting with both position statements and extra security if necessary. And this example is another Twitter pull, and this is around Lady Gaga, which you may know that we have an association with. And there were some issues with her refusing to denounce R. Kelly when the R. Kelly documentary came out this past January. So we saw a lot of activity around that. And thankfully, the system, again, is robust and intuitive enough to be able to pull things for us very, very quickly so we can respond if necessary. Here's just another example of a protest in the Champs-Élysées in France. I'm sure everyone's familiar with all the protesting in Paris. We have a store down there, so keeping an open line on what's going on social media and providing that to people on the ground is very important, and the system allows to do that for us. Okay, I'm just going to close my session with just talking a little bit about how we use the data to manage the data that we're pulling from the system in our case management system, and how we also use it to empower our people. The slides that you see here relate to an application that was developed by a third party that allows us to provide our employees with the ability to be a frontline detective. Employees are very passionate about protecting their brand, and let's face it, everyone likes to be a little bit of a detective from time to time. So this gives them the power right in their pocket on their smartphones, and you can use it both in an iPhone or Android device. And in the screenshots you see here are just what we use, and it's very, very simple, and they can just report and tell us about any kind of incident. But the other option that the app does for us is anything that's brought in through the application is immediately sent to our database. So if someone reports about something, we don't have to then take it and re-report it. It automatically drops into our database, which is really, really great. We also have the feedback loops and communication ports on this particular application, which allows us to communicate with our amateur detectives, just ways of how they're impacting what we're doing throughout Tiffany. So it's really, really important from that end of it as well. One powerful thing I had mentioned previously about how the system manages data for us, one powerful example here is, so when someone told us about an issue that they found with some products, the system automatically, as I mentioned, will record all of the data that's associated with that in the application. As you can see here, there's 30 images. These are all high definition images that were captured on the application and immediately dropped into our case management system. So it's really, really important because data is becoming very complex. Investigations are becoming very complex. And to have to take all of this stuff and sort through it and add it manually would be very, very challenging and time consuming. The application eliminates that, and the photos are immediately posted and easy to read and navigate through. Very, very important. The database here, so anything that we're pulling on the automation side is then captured here in our case management system. And the screen you see here just allows for us to get a very quick snapshot of our day and what's going on in the case management world. So you can filter this to look any way you want. And on the very far right side, the system shows the recent activity, or really the audit trail for the system. So anytime anyone touches case management, you have sort of crumbs to look at and say who's doing what are they doing, how long are they on the system, and what case are they working through and managing on. The final screen that I wanted to share in terms of case management is a filtering screen. When you drive into the case management, all of our cases are captured for us. Every single thing that we investigate or add to the case management system, whether it's automatically through data automation or manually if we just put a case in, it's all contained within here. And this view is really my customized view, so it allows me to display whatever I want at any time. And in this example, I've asked it to just show me in a 3-month period any brick and mortar cases for counterfeiting. And what you'll see is I only asked it to give me closed cases. I didn't care about the ones that are open. I just wanted to see the closed ones. And then I just wanted to quickly see some attributes around that. So where is it, what date, how many pieces were seized in the action, and that quickly displays. So when I'm looking, my filter only shows me this, and it filters out the noise. One final thing on the system that we really enjoy that really helps our workflow and keep us organized is it allows us to pull and create customized reports. So all of the massive amounts of data we're collecting, and I forgot to mention, in the automated data, the system collected in 2018 over 1 million pieces of potential threats against our organization. I only shared with you the ones that we actioned earlier, but there's so much volumes of data, so even the ones that we did collect, this system allows us to keep it organized by customized reporting. So I can quickly go in and just select the type of report I want to generate. So for example, if I want to just learn about social media and what we did in the last 2 to 3 months, I can quickly create a report that says, just show me social media. The system does that. It drops it out into a nice chart that I can email and send off, or I can drop it into Excel and play around with it and create my own fancy charts. So the system is very, very intuitive and very, very good for managing large volumes of data, which we're very pleased with. I think that concludes my portion of the webinar, and I'm going to turn it over to Sascha Meyer.
Great, thank you. All right, so yes, now depart for IWC Schaffhausen. So IWC Schaffhausen is located in Schaffhausen, Switzerland. We are founded 1868 by Mr. F.A. Jones, who was an American pioneer coming to Switzerland to produce watches for the American market, because in those days Switzerland was a low salary country, but already had excellent resources in the watch industry. And he was the only one in the German-speaking part of Switzerland, just for the historical part of IWC, yes. So, but we are a global company with a global footprint. We have a lot of own boutiques, we have flagship boutiques, we have service centers all over the world. We have authorized dealers and so on. So yes, we are a global company. We just opened up recently a new manufacturing site in Schaffhausen, which has been newly built. So where we consolidated all the different production lines and in one brand new location. IWC is part of the Richemont Group. The Richemont Group has been founded in 1988. It's one of the leading luxury goods group in the world. They are located in Geneva, Switzerland. They have about 11 billion euro revenue and a profit of 1.8. What was the latest figures? Richemont Group has, they started 88 by acquiring some major brands, which you probably know. Most probably, it's Cartier, which you know, but also Montblanc is very famous, and the others. And then they're starting doing more and more acquisitions. We joined the group in 2000. And the recent acquisitions was the Yoox Net-a-Porter Group and some other brands, as you see here. So the group itself has 18 different brands. We are one of them. They have 40 manufacturing sites, 40 distribution centers, and about 1,132 or 23 internal boutiques, and so on. They also have our own schools, and it's a really large group we are working with, and but it's really interesting to work in. Also some very positive stuff. So why for us is counterfeiting, brand protection, digital risk a topic? Simply because we are in middle of this digital transformation, I would say since 2, 3, 4 years. Why? Because our market has changed. Typically, when you deal with luxury goods, it's really related to user experience. What does that mean? Typically, you don't buy a watch for 20,000 bucks. Just online in e-commerce like Amazon. So why? Because you don't buy a watch for checking the time. This you have on your smartphone or wherever else. This is something you buy. You want to see, you want to touch. So classically, you go into a boutique or to a retailer and check, and you want to see it. It's about this entire experience. However, this also changed in our world. In the past couple of years, people are buying more online. They're also, for example, Chinese tourists, when they come to Switzerland and they buy a watch, they go home back to China, and then you want to, for example, buy another watch. But if there's no boutique nearby, as you know how large China is, you want to buy it online. But if you want to buy a watch for 20,000 bucks online, you want to buy it from the vendor directly. Just one use case. There's many of the different use cases. But also you want to give the people the service experience. So for example, when your watch is in the service center, you want to know where's my watch, what is the status of my watch, and you want to do the entire service to be transparent for the customer. But also it's the entire social media stuff and so on. So this is what we call our digital transformation. It was huge, major projects, but it's a lot of online services involvement. So what I mean by that, it's not something you have in-house. Most of the services are outside of your network, of your boundary. There's a lot of different services which need to be integrated. There's a lot of small services. There's a lot of APIs you have to connect. So all of this is moving out of your boundary, as I will show. So what is our biggest risk? The biggest risk we have here is definitely the reputational risk. Because why? Because this is something that has to do with trust, because when you have all the customer data, when you have all the sensitive information, you don't want to get those data gets leaked out from your customers, because it will damage your reputation, and this is one of our biggest risks, and we have to take care of. So what is important? First of all, what I said, it's there's a lot in this digital transformation about third-party management. What do I mean by that? So for example, if you go to start a new campaign targeting, for example, the US, so what is needed? Of course, they need your customer data. They need your data. They need to process your data. They need to generate new services out of that, and so on. But also it could be marketing tools, marketing automation tools, and so on. All of those need, in fact, the data. So here we have a process in place which, from a legal perspective, from a technical perspective, and from an organizational perspective, helps us to identify risks and to analyze the different major suppliers. I think in general, 90% of the new vendors, and this we don't need, but at the other 10, we really look very detailed into it. So for example, if we have a new cloud automation tool for marketing, what do we do? First of all, we check which data is in there. So for example, if there's classified data like customer data or any other confidential information, there will be a legal appendix in the contract which tells, in fact, that the supplier has to inform us about 72 hours if they get hacked. So they have to inform us, to come to us. Further, what we do a technical penetration testing. This is what we do definitely. Then we have a kind of risk appetite, which we are going to decide then later if we go or no go with this supplier, or they have to fix it first. And then also there is an operational in-house procedure to deal with the business. If they do any changes or something like that, we get informed. And I think finally what we also do is, for example, here with the digital shadows, to tell them, look, this is a new supplier which holds critical data. If this supplier gets hacked or if there's anything special, then we in fact monitor them continuously, which is important. Why is this so important to monitor them continuously? Very simple, because if you do an audit or an assessment on a supplier, you see the risk as it is today. But the world changes. Tomorrow it's different. So we need continuously to monitor them. If there's an attack planned against this supplier, if there was a data leak or there was a hacking attack against this supplier, we want to know that, and we should know it on time in order to manage the risks. What I already mentioned is, like, in the past, I would say it was like we're protecting our network. We have big firewalls, we have all this stuff, highly militarized our network, but the world has changed. As I said, data is now leaving the boundaries, the network. So we have to start looking out of the window and out of our castle, as we call it, and to check what's going on out there. So, and this is why we then selected Digital Shadows to help us in terms of cyber intelligence, so that we can go to start looking at those digital risks. So what are typical risks or challenges we are facing here at IWC? Definitely what I said is high priority. Number one is our brand identity and the reputation. That's very important to us. And if there's anything, and I think Charles already showed some very beautiful examples, and we have similar examples, that we have to clean them up. Very, very simple. Then we also have this problem with the counterfeits. So there's a lot of copies out there. We have a couple of hundred sites every month that we have to take offline. It's very, very important. And here, as I said, especially when you move to the e-commerce market, you have to make sure these things are clean, because what you don't want is to have a customer that buys a fake watch for a couple of $1,000 and you have then the complaints. That's really a risk, but I think we have that quite good under control. Then accidental data breach, yes, it can happen. It can happen to anyone. I think the major thing here is that you find it and you mitigate the risk on time. Typically, what is a typical use case? Yes, someone is going to a conference and is showing some slides. The conference then is putting the slides online for the attendees, but it's not password protected, and then you can simply find it. So a typical thing is go to Google, type in IWC confidential, and hopefully you won't find anything, but this is the typical way it starts. So you also have in the deep web, you have in the dark web stuff. So the data breach is really a topic that needs to be checked very, very closely. Also, I think from the next point, corporate industrial espionage. I mean, imagine how many watch brands out there. So in order to have a competitive advantage, you need to keep your data under control, and also especially with the point before for the data breaches. You know, it's not the first time you find some 100 slides presentation with all the stuff in there through Google. So that's a very, very important point for us to really keep an eye on the data that is on the internet available. Then the next one is identity theft. I think that's something that everyone has experienced in the past years. It's simply copying social media profiles. It's fake emails. It's also what Charles showed is the domain abuse. You know, you're creating, for example, a new domain. It's called IVVC, but if you look in Outlook, it looks like IWC. So you can have that. We also had an phishing campaign, for example. So all this really needs to be catched at the root, as we call it in German. So you really have to kill the risk at the root, and this is why it's so important to have such a program, such a tool or service in place, and not to start protecting yourself behind the firewall. That doesn't help anymore. It's mandatory, nothing, but you know, this is from 99. I would say standard basic stuff. You have to go out and check for digital risks. Then certainly, I mean, we have a lot of locations, we have a lot of boutiques. There's threats to physical infrastructures without any big examples now, but if you have boutiques in all major cities, you know what's going on in all major cities right now. It depends on the country. You have protests, and also what Charles showed in France, in Paris. So these are things you need to have under control. That's very, very important. And what I said, competitive threats to our market position, I already mentioned. So how did we approach this? I think that's very important to understand. Before you start such a program, you have to think about a strategy. How do we tackle this? You know, how do we go there? So what we did was, in fact, to use the 5 architectures of intelligence. It's a framework that has been worked out with one of our partners. What do I mean by this? So what we do is we have 5 interconnected domains, which you will see in the next slide. Those 5 domains have been designed and optimized for our company so that we really perform in these things, because it's not so easy. You know, if when you go out in such an intelligence program and you start collecting information, you got to start to mitigate digital risks. You know, the organization is changing every day. So you need the information to come to you as a security officer, and you need to be able to adjust the search capabilities of the service itself. So the 5 architectures of intelligence this is how it looks like. Let me explain. In the middle, you have your organization. The organization is very important. You need to have good connections to the different stakeholders. You first have to identify who are your stakeholders, how you will collaborate with them. So, for example, when you find some, for example, we had a beautiful case just 2-3 months ago. We had a watch on eBay which has been sold, but it was recognized by the police as stolen. So the police came to us and said, "This looks suspicious. Can you verify if this is a real watch or not based on the pictures on eBay?" So what you need is a good connection to your in-house stakeholders and ask them to verify that if it's possible based on the pictures. But also, if you have some websites which look suspicious, but you're not sure if this is a legitimate reseller or not, you need to be able to check that from an operational perspective. Then if you look on the operational part itself, this is something you need to be able to see, okay, what data can we use? What is actually the workflow if we create an incident? What are the processes in my operational daily business? How do we manage different issues in here and so on? You also need to check what are the important information for my organization. So it brings us to the informational. Who wants to be informed about this one? What is the data model you will use? So in fact, your keywords, because if you start going out to the internet and you search for threats and you start looking for tools, for digital shadows, or you use just OSINT tools, you need to have keywords. And keywords could be, for example, it starts with the name of your products. It starts with the name of your locations. It starts with synonyms for your company. Because if you go out to Google and type in the IWC, what you will get is a hell of a lot. You will get the International Whaling Commission. You will get the International Wrestling Confederation. You will get the International Women's Club. So you have to eliminate these things, and you need to work on your keywords quite strict. But also, IWC stands for International Watch Company. So this also needs to be clarified and specified. So the keywords here is really important. So just for the keywords, you will need a one-day workshop to have that really in place. But then you also have maybe major events, because what we do is we have two major events during the year, which is the SIHH. It's one of the largest luxury watch exhibitions in Geneva. But also then we have internal events which are important, which you don't want any data to get leaked, and so on and so on. So this is really, really important to have the informational part in place here. Then you have the technological part. Yes, that's very important. Then you use, you want to have some mappings between the different tools. You will have then services. Yeah, in Digital Shadows, you also have to tell them what we are looking for, what is really important, what is here. But then you also want maybe to start some own investigations using OSINT tools, for example, because you want to monitor them continuously here. So it's really the technological part that you want to use here is really, really important. And then you have the cognitive part, which is the logic. How do we problem finding, problem solving? How do we handle the complexity and the system thinking here? So that's really, really something you have to consider. So the strategy is really, really important to have that here. So after running an intelligence program now, I would say since, let me think, more than 5 years now, I can definitely tell that it was worth doing it. It's what we have done so far is really, really significantly have been able to reduce our reputational risks, the internal, external to the organization. We saw a lot of good examples from charts that we had similar of them, also fake stuff selling, but also threats against our brand. Physical threats will you see in the next one. But also we had data leakages which we have been able to find. For example, SlideShare. SlideShare is something that you have to check permanently, because this is something you will find any information from the company. But also doxing attacks, where you can go to collect information. Potential DDoS attacks is also something. But again, counterfeits and the vendors, I think in the 5 years with thousands and thousands of websites taken offline. And I think that's very important. Other hand, what we've done, yes, we outsourced our stuff mostly to Digital Shadows. Why? Because if you run such an intelligence program, is always in my experience, and I saw a lot of those projects, is you can do it free of charge. Then you do it with OSINT tools, but then you need headcounts, analysts, which will check that for that. Or you go to outsource that to a service like Digital Shadows, but then you have to pay for it. So it's very simple. It depends on your scope. If you have if you want to do it very, very limited to a specific group, for example, just on counterfeit, but very limited on a couple of sites, you can do it with OSINT tools. But if you want to do the full show and really protect your brand, then it's a question between outsourcing or having headcounts. But I can tell you, I saw a project where it's not fun to click through 4,000 alerts every week. People will run away and they say, no, I have other things to do in my life. Yes. So the other thing, the incident monitoring and reporting is to senior management is very important. What do I mean by that? If you can show them, listen, this is what happened the last quarter. So we had 500 or 1,000 replica sites offline. We had so and so much identity thefts. We had so much cyber attacks we were able to prevent. We had 3 data leakages, and we said, oh my God. So also what you do is to shape awareness on the top management level, which is very, very important. And it's really a key to success. The other hand is the awareness on the staff, on the employees. It's also very impressive, because what we do internally is we're talking about incidents, and this is what I can recommend to any company. If you want to raise awareness, it's tell them what's going on your site and what's going on out there. And if you have, for example, a database got hacked and they found it on the internet, what will typically happen? You receive an email from Digital Shadows which show you, okay, those accounts have been identified with those and those passwords. Go and talk to the employees. Tell them, look, this is what happened, and this is how you can prevent it. And don't register your company email address here, please. And they said, why they are not? Can this happen to us? And I said, yes, of course, but we have to take care about updates. We have to take care about monitoring the supplier and so on. So I think also this here is very important in terms of awareness. So I think this is really a very, very big benefit that comes. And yes, what I said, we're also having some in-house tools which we do for some special operations or special monitoring, and it simply closed the gap to the big bang. Just a quick overview, what is for a typical month. I mean, we are very active in the internet, so we're about 500,000 mentions online. So this is a slide from Digital Shadows, which I received, but I think it's impressive to show that. It's the automated analytics already filtered it down to 25K. Then the analyst assessed 886 incidents, and in the end, we had 68 incidents per month. And as you see on the left side, it could be everything. It could be cyber threats, brand exposure, third-party risk, physical threat, data exposure, VIP exposure, and infrastructure, which is important. Quick overview about what happened 2018. As you see, the main thing for us is brand protection, and it simply confirms what Charles showed for Tiffany, that you have so many fake websites coming up, so many social media sites, but also infrastructure part is very important, which of course needs to be fixed. I can tell you in 5 years this picture changes every year, so it's very dynamic. It really depends on your digital footprint, of course. But also, it's really constantly changing. So you don't know what will be on this chart for 2019. But brand protection is definitely one of the major stuff. So yes, so thank you. So here are my contact details. I'm on LinkedIn, and now hand over to you guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Sascha, and thanks, Charles, for that. That was really, really fascinating to see what you're both doing with the kind of perspective of protecting your brand online. Obviously, we work with a lot of organizations to do just this. Just a little bit about us. We've been going since 2011, work with hundreds of brands across the world to help them protect themselves in this new digital age. So specifically that filters down into protecting against unwanted exposure, threats to that unwanted exposure, which together enables them to minimize their digital risk. I think Sascha spoke a little bit about the different use cases that we cover. I think when you talk about looking beyond your castle walls, it really falls down to 3 areas for us. First of all, you've got that data loss, so data that's being exposed, whether that's inadvertently or malicious. You've then got the online brand, so where that's being impersonated, domains, mobile apps, spoof social media profiles. I'll dig into that a little bit more. And then you've also got your attack surface. So as you add more and more services, you gain more vulnerabilities, more infrastructure issues that need to be remediated. Otherwise, you can leave yourself open to attack. And then underlying all of these 3 is intelligence about the threat to those assets that are either being exposed or impersonated online. So getting a view of all of these is really, really important, and is how we go about helping organizations. So specifically just focusing on that brand, because that's the big challenge for organizations. How do we do that? So our main service is Digital Shadows Searchlight, and that covers many, many areas. Specifically with brand, it's things like domain infringement, looking at different permutations of domains like typo squats, domain squats, fuzzing, a host of different tactics for that. This can be phishing sites, but it's also counterfeit goods being sold online. It could be insiders selling goods in criminal locations. That's pretty common. Leaked product designs, maybe you've got an upcoming launch and you've got employee from a factory sharing product design images on social media. You want to be detecting that before it goes in the massive public mainstream. And then in addition to that, on social media, you've got coupon fraud, points fraud, and then mobile applications, which may be being spoofed or malicious and duping customers into revealing their credentials or other personal information. And then specifically how Searchlight works, it's really, really important to make it as relevant from the outset as possible. I've spoken with Charles and Sascha about the challenges of dealing with all that noise that's out there. So our approach to that is, first of all, to make it really, really relevant. So we configure that to make it fully tailored to the assets of an organization. So that could be things like brand names, domain names, Twitter handles, Instagram pages, any patent information, intellectual property, as Sasha mentioned, third parties, any IP ranges, and that will help to identify any infrastructure weaknesses. But there's a host of all different types of assets that we want to be looking for and making it really, really relevant there. Then the second bit is making sure you've got the coverage, combining the automated collection of things like you've got the dark web, got mobile app stores, you've got paste sites, SlideShare, social media, misconfigured online devices, and then you've got the human and applied research bit. So gaining access to these criminal forums, hard to reach sources, which will ensure combining these two approaches, you're really getting a broad, deep coverage into where your brand is being misused or targeted online. Thirdly, is like adding context to that with threat intelligence. So not only is where is you being exposed, but where is the threat and how can you put that into context? So within each incident and alert that we provide, it's got an impact written up by a team of analysts and recommended action. You can then pivot into intelligence profiles of actors and markets that are currently active. We've also got shadow search, which is a way to search across whether that's criminal forums, threat feeds, who is information, intelligence incidents, and gain that further context. And then it's important to kind of broaden what you're understanding about the threat landscape as well. So we've got weekly intelligence summaries that sum up each of the latest breaking news for the previous 7 days, so you can stay on top of what's going on there. And then finally, got the mitigation aspect. There's no point in doing all of this if you're not going to actually be doing something about it. So we want to be providing mitigation options so that teams such as Sasha's and Charles can actually do something about it. So you've got a recommended action, being able to launch templated takedowns, but also manage takedowns from within the portal, and we can help organizations with that managed aspect. Now, the thing that I'll finish on for those looking to start gaining some visibility into their online brand and securing that online brand, we have published a report which goes into a bit more detail into those 3 areas that I outlined and focuses on online brand security. Specifically, we outline some free tools which organizations can use to monitor where that brand is being exposed and impersonated online. So for anybody looking for first steps into this, follow that link provided and you can get some really great information for how you would start off doing that. That's all I'll be sharing today. So I'll hand back to Jeff.
Great. Thanks, gentlemen. Those were very interesting presentations. We do have a few questions. The first question that we have is, what is the biggest challenge you're facing protecting your brand? Charlie, do you want to take that one first?
Yes, of course. Thank you for the question. I think our biggest challenge, and I mentioned it in my brief overview of my slides, is the social media and spamming campaigns that have really birthed into a huge challenge for our brand and our organization. The social media side of it, most of the counterfeiting practices, I think all brand protection professionals will tell you, have really migrated over there. I'd say, mostly 5-6 years ago, everything was on the surface web and then started to move below that and then into the social media circles for a couple of reasons. One, it's difficult to disrupt any kind of exchange activity on a social media network. So if someone hooks up or meets with someone on Instagram, you can remove the counterfeit posting and take down the list or the actual Instagram page. But the challenge remains that all of the relationships that were developed can continue. So it's very, very difficult in that sense. But our biggest strategy at this point is on the visibility side. When those things are up to, as I mentioned, make sure we get them very quickly so we automate that and make sure we take action as quickly as possible to remove the content. And then the spamming campaign really was a problem. I think we've disrupted it enough where they'll probably leave us alone for a little while. But it is challenging because a lot of our customers really do believe that we're offering them a one-time special incentive because they're followers of our brand. And they don't realize that, number one, that isn't obviously true. And number two, that while they click on these links, they're being driven into the deep web, which really isn't a great place to be. It's not like the dark web, but still, I don't think they'd prefer to be shopping off of the surface web, and they don't really realize that. And we found that out almost by accident when we first heard about it, and they provided us with the URL, which when we searched using anonymity and searching off network computers, realized that the URL they're providing doesn't exist because they're giving us the advertising URL, which they didn't realize wasn't the actual link that they ended up on. So those are very disruptive problems for us, and we continue to stay on top of them and produce metrics around it for both our stakeholders within the organization, and because we're a public company, a lot of our board members and a lot of people that are interested in our company really demand that we do that to keep our brand as clean as possible and enforce in the best way we possibly can.
Great, thanks, Charlie. Sasha, what are your thoughts on that question?
Well, from our perspective, the biggest challenge is definitely the really, really fast changing landscape of tools, services, cloud, and so on, because the business want to move fast. However, all these things need to be reviewed, and we need to look into it. And there's so many services popping up quickly and going down again and changing left and right. So here, what you need to have in place is a good process for the evaluation of the different services and tools, because you don't want to block the business. You want to be an enabler for the business with security. And and the coverage, of course, if, as I said, the most new services are online or in the cloud, and you need to be able to catch them. If there's something happens or if there's any leaks, you need to be able to find them, and this is your job, and this is why we need a good partner.
Great, thanks, Sasha. Michael, what are your thoughts? Are you seeing anything in particular that brands are facing in terms of their biggest challenge?
Yeah, I think for us, it's not only the tooling, but all the other aspects that help them to effectively manage their brand. So looking beyond tooling to things like effectively reporting that, having a leader in place of some sort of leadership in the organization, and then having effective processes to share that information and have coherence around that. So I think it's thinking about all the aspects and not just tooling that is a challenge for organizations.
Great, thanks. The next question that we have is, as a high-profile brand, how are you reducing your attack surface? Sasha, do you want to take that one first?
Sure. As I mentioned, I think it's very important that you get an overview about services, tools, cloud, new partners. As a chief information security officer, you need to be able, or the information needs to come to you. And this is what we have done. We've established a process that every new software, every new partner, cloud services needs to pass our desk. So we need to approve it, and then we put it into our intelligence service. So we need to be able to monitor them and have a good overview about our digital assets. Of course, it's difficult. You won't catch 100%, but you get close to it. But also, we have an internal procurement department where, if you go to buy something completely new, you need an approval by security. And that's very important. It took us years to establish that service, and it's really, really, really related to awareness, because if the organization is not aware of the threat and the need that security looks into it, you will struggle for sure. But once it's established, you need to maintain it. So as I said in the other question, you need to be an enabler and not a blocker. And this is the major problem of security in most organizations, that you are recognized as a blocker because you will slow down my project and, just asking strange questions. No, but I think this has to change, and it's very important to tackle it that way.
Great, thanks, Sasha. What are your thoughts on that question, Charlie?
Yeah, I think the simplest thing is you have to have some kind of functional program around monitoring your brand. I think we've heard today a number of ways that we do that. Obviously, the panel did a great job of standing up processes that can be utilized, and I think something like Digital Shadows, we have something like that, is really necessary in this day and age. I think there's so much data. There's so much out there. So having the intuitive knowledge of what is out there, scraping it appropriately, and not just from one source. You have to have multiple sources, as we saw in Digital Shadows example, that you're not just pulling from the surface web, for example. You have to look everywhere, and you have to combine and share that knowledge across your enterprise. So it's not good to be insular and keep it, hey, this is investigations, we're just going to do this. Especially when it's outside of your lane or expertise, you have to bring in other members to help steer that. And I think finally, whatever data you're pulling, it really is important to have a system to manage it, which I talked about in my presentation. Something that's robust, something that storage isn't an issue, and as we've heard a couple of times already, something that is well protected. If you're going to use a cloud-based system, which I think most are, you have to make sure the security around that and partnering with people like Sasha and your organization to ensure that if you bring something in to manage your data, that it's very secure. And but it's very important because it helps you manipulate the information very, very quickly and provide to your stakeholders the necessary information that they're seeking. I think in this day and age, people don't want to wait even a day to receive a response to an email where they're requesting some intelligence around the work that you're performing. So I think those two components for us are very critical and really help us.
Great, thanks, Charlie. Michael, are you seeing brands adopt best practices in terms of reducing an attack surface or their attack surfaces?
Yeah, I think you've got, obviously, as many instances, you've got different types of organizations that are at different maturities. I think particularly at the most mature organizations, you're seeing gaining an awareness of not only what your footprint looks like, but the ability to continuously understand problems and weaknesses and where that's exposed, understanding how they can achieve that and tie that in, as we say, with different stakeholders in the organization. We're certainly seeing the more mature folks moving towards that, but certainly an appetite for a wider set of people to start attempting to do those things.
Great, thanks, Michael. The last question that we have is, how do you work with other departments in your organization to address the threats? This one seems to be directed to Charles and Sasha. Charlie, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, of course, thanks. I mentioned it very, very briefly in my presentation when I talked about the overview of what my group manages, or what we're in charge of for the organization. We do have a committee that overlooks all of our investigations. It was a difficult task in getting this together, many years actually of sort of push and pull among the organization, but we finally were able to, a couple of years ago, stand up this committee, and it consists of the head of legal for our organization, the head of IT security, of course our group in investigative services, and internal audit, and human resources as well. So it's a great variety of individuals that come together, and we meet every quarter in person, and if we have pressing issues or investigations that come up, those are discussed over conference calls. Those cases usually are surrounding items that are either challenging or difficult, or that need a decision and other stakeholders to weigh in, because oftentimes when you start an investigation, it tends to deviate in different directions. So it may seem like something my team would handle, and then it quickly migrates into maybe a human resource issue or an IT security issue, or even an internal audit policy type of situation. So having that committee has been very, very good for us, very successful. We have good communication around it, and we have good attendance. Everyone really shows up because it's very interesting when you get into some of the higher topical cases. I think you find that the stakeholders really want to hear about some of those in detail and how they were resolved. And finally, in that group, we're able to learn and adjust. So specifically on disposition, so we can be more consistent around the way we handle discipline for cases. So whether or not we terminate an employee if it's an internal case, and just making sure that's consistent, so that protects you from the legal side of things, where we found before the committee there were many inconsistencies which drove us into the standing up this committee.
Great, thanks, Charlie. Sasha, what are your thoughts?
So what we have done was, about 4 years ago, we established a policy, as mentioned, that every new software cloud service partner needs to be registered within the security department. I mean, as it is with all policies, you can just throw out the policy and say this is the rule. But what we did was really to also have a communication campaign and awareness campaign next to it. So we permanently informed the business about why we are doing this, why this is so important. We were talking about incidents as examples. And I would say over the time, we raised a lot of awareness especially on the department managers and head offs, and that they know, okay, this is the reason why every new software, every new project needs to have a security review. And as I said, after all these years, we are now turned out to be an enabler. So they are coming now to us because they want to have the security approval, and we always show that we are not a blocker, we are an enabler, and we're permanently communicating about it. We are improving the process about that, and it got a lot of fun now, to be honest. And then I think it changed the culture of the company over time. And this is what ultimately what you want to achieve from a security perspective, to change the culture that security is present within the company. It is you hear about it, you can feel it, and it's important for our brand, especially when you're such an exposed brand like we are.
Great, thanks, Sasha. Thanks, Charlie. Thanks, Sasha, and thanks, Michael, for your presentations today. And thanks, everybody, for attending today's session. Watch your inbox for an invite to our next webinar on digital risk management and cybersecurity.